Hi, this is Jeremy Kellett, Director of Recruiting here at Oakley Trucking, and I'm your host for this podcast. This is episode 54. Today we're going to talk with two special guests from OOIDA, which is Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association. We're going to visit with Mr. Mike Matousek, Manager of Government Affairs, and also Lewie, Pugh, Executive Vice President at OOIDA. I've had a couple owner-operators reach out to me and wanting to hear more about this AB 5 bill that's coming through, that's been passed by the House and is being introduced to the Senate. But we also are going to talk about some services that OOIDA offers. We got a great episode lined up for you guys. But first, let's hear from Vickie Chastain on this week's Need to Know segment, sponsored by Aero Truck Sales.
As an owner-operator with Oakley Trucking, paperwork is a huge part of your daily routine. One important piece of paperwork is your monthly maintenance report, and that is this week's Need to Know segment. Monthly maintenance reports are due at the first of every month and can be sent in with your TransFlow app using a valid pay number. It needs to be filled out correctly by having your truck number, odometer reading, brakes, and description of any repairs done, as well as copies of your receipts. Do your part to get these turned in so your dispatcher can concentrate on keeping you rolling and not have to shut you down until this is complete. I'm Vickie Chastain, and that's this week's Need to Know segment.
So, Aero Truck Sales, great sponsor of the Oakley Podcast. We have known these guys for years, dealt with Trey, dealt with Keith up in Springfield, Missouri. These guys are solid. We have confidence in them, and that's why we recommend them to all of our owner-operators to look into them if you're interested in buying a truck. They're great for first-time owner-operators. There's no leasing. It's straight financing. They got all 5-year and newer making models. They're doing a special right now. If you buy a truck from them, you get a $250 fuel card and a CB radio. Mention that you heard it on the Oakley Podcast. The best part about these guys is service after the sale, and that goes a long ways with us here at Oakley Trucking. So be sure and give them a call. Call Keith Wilson, 573-216-6047. Aero Truck Sales, Springfield, Missouri. Tell them you heard it on the Oakley Podcast. Okay, let's get started with episode 54. We're talking to Mike Matousek, Manager of Government Affairs, and Lewie Pugh, Executive Vice President at OOIDA. Hey, guys, how's it going today? You doing all right?
Yeah, we're doing real good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing good.
You know, I have to say, I went and watched you guys' podcast. Well, no, it's not really a podcast. It's live, Exit 24 the other day, and you were discussing something. That's pretty good. I like that y'all doing that live. That's pretty good. Is that taking off pretty good, Exit 24?
Yeah, it's starting to take off. It was a little slow getting started, but it seems like it's taking off. In fact, last week's show, I think, was our biggest viewed show, and we had the most callers at one time and everything. So it's really starting to pick up, gain some momentum. We started late summer, early fall, I think, but it's really starting to gather some good momentum and stuff. So, yeah, we're real happy with it. And if you watched last week, that was our first episode with video, so which adds a little better to it. I joked and said it was Beauty and the Beast with me and Mike.
I'm not going to say which one was which, though. I'll let y'all determine that.
It's probably Beast and the Beast.
Beast and the Beast. Well, just for our, I don't know if y'all have done much research on the Oakley Podcast, but we're a trucking company here, Oakley Trucking, out of North Little Rock, Arkansas. We started this podcast about a year ago, and we have about 850 owner-operators. They're all independent contractors, leased to Oakley Trucking. And we came up with this podcast to help our owner-operators be successful. And I've listened to you guys a couple times and read some of your articles, and I think the thing we have in common is we want owner-operators to be successful. And that's whether they're with Oakley or not. We want owner-operators to be successful. And I know OOIDA does a great job. I mean, that's y'all's main goal. And if you could, one of you, it doesn't matter to me, but could you kind of give us a little insight on OOIDA, maybe what you guys offer and what you could do for the owner-operator or company driver, right?
Yeah, I'll take that, I guess. We were founded in 1973 by a group of truckers it was during the oil embargo stuff. And, of course, they thought they got together, thought they'd go to Washington, tell them their problems. Congress would fix it, they go back to trucking, and we all live happily ever after. But here we are, almost 50 years later. We're still fighting a lot of the same fights they were started fighting in 1973. But with that being said, we were started by truckers. We're still ran by truckers. Our board of directors are all truckers, some drivers, owner-operators, some lease, some of their motor carrier authority. So we're a makeup of everything. And then our president, of course, Todd, he was a trucker to be an executive, on the board and to be the president, or myself as executive vice president. I was a trucker for 23 years. Todd was a trucker for a few years back in the 70s. And in fact, he sold his trailer to buy the typesetting machine for our magazine way back when we were just a little dinky place. Mm-hmm. But with that, we've grown. We realized there was needs that owner-operators couldn't find out there, especially in the 80s, was insurance. We started offering insurance to our members. We have a drug testing consortium now. We do permitting. We do licensing. We have some healthcare products that we offer for members. One big thing I like that we do is our compliance department. If you're a member of OOIDA and you call in here, this is free. If you got a ticket that you got questions about what to do about, if you released a motor carrier and you've got questions about, if you're getting a contract and we'll read it for you. I mean, just any question you can think of under the sun, they get over there about trucking. That's free. We'll help you. If we don't know the answer, we'll get you the answer. There's times people call in and we don't know, but, we'll call you right. We'll get the answer and call you back. So we have that great service. Another service, which goes into what you're saying with Oakley and wanting owner-operators to be successful, our foundation. We do have a foundation here. They have all kinds of educational resources, and you can get to that stuff even if you're not a member. It's online, most of it. There's all kinds of little videos, 15, 20-minute videos on authority, insurance training, dealing with enforcement, just all kinds of stuff like that out there. And then the big thing is, I like what you said, how Oakley wants owner-operators to be successful. And I do know who Oakley is. In fact, I almost leased Oakley a couple times. You guys, I suppose you still used to haul out of Yorksville, Ohio, at the aluminum plant, which is where I used to live. I live 15 miles from there. I hauled coils out of there, and you guys were hauling scrap in or out. I don't know which, but I'd see your trucks in there all the time. Talk to your drivers, and nice people, too. Your guys out there on the road had nice-looking equipment, and we're always very professional, so hats off for that. But that's what I started to say was we at OOIDA want people to be successful. That's why we have the foundation. And then they have a thing called Truck to Success. It's a seminar we do every year, and that's the big thing in it. Our foundation does it. They take you from the bottom step all the way to getting your own motor carrier authority, leasing to carriers, what to look for in contracts. It's an A to Z to becoming an owner-operator and being successful. And it's a very minimal amount to attend it, and that was started just solely to get people to come and become successful. And it's amazing when people take it. They all come in on Monday, and they're all fired up, and they're going on 100 trucks and blah, 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 blah. And by the end of it, 3 days later, some are like, there's no way I ever want to own a truck. And then some of them are like, I still want a truck, but I know I'm not ready now. I need to pump the brakes a little. So, that's good. You say, owning a truck, I know myself, I bought my first truck at 22. It's a life-changing experience, and trucking is a very, very slim profit margin, and you have to be really careful in what you're doing and research and just don't go into it blindly. And it's way too easy, in my opinion, in this world to get into the trucking business, unfortunately, and it sets a lot of people up for failure, which is really sad.
That is the truth, Lewie, because we try here. We're a real good company for first-time owner-operators and to get started, and we've actually had a couple of episodes on going from company driver to buying your own truck, and are you ready to do that, actually? You got to be ready to do that. You can't just say, wake up one day, I'm going to go buy a truck, and I'll be to work here in a couple of days. That ain't the way it works, and we do good at trying to tell people, step by step how to do that and help them get into so they will be successful. Because if you get into some of these situations and it does them no good to get into a truck and then they fail. That is just that's a bad way to go. And you guys, I know OOIDA even I think y'all rate companies a lot of times. I don't know how you rate them, but I know I've dealt with Tom Crowley over the years there at OOIDA, and may call him once in a while and say, hey, how's everything going? You heard anything on Oakley Trucking? Once in a while he'll call me and, hey, we had a guy call about Oakley Trucking and ask some questions and that kind of deal. So I know y'all kind of rate some companies, don't you?
We used to. We don't really do that much anymore. The way we did it was through our members. If you had a good or bad experience, you could call in. In fact, I used that before I was a board member here, because I've been on the board here 17 years and been in the office 3, but when I was just out there trucking, I called in even before I was a board member, got some rating a couple of times. But, it's like everything. It only works as good as the information you can get. And, we kind of counted on members to give it. And, some people participated, some people didn't. So it's something we sort of kind of phased away from. Now, we do keep contracts. And, the biggest thing we always tell our members, if you're going to lease to a carrier, get the contract, read the contract. If you don't understand what's in the contract, send it to us. We'll read it. We'll tell you the good, the bad. Yep. When we do Truck to Success, I tell everybody, there's no perfect contract out there. There just isn't. There's no perfect contract trucking as a general truck. But there's a lot of contracts are a lot better than others. And you just have to, as a business person, it's anything you do in business, you have to figure out what you'll accept and what you won't accept. Yeah. And if you want to accept that contract, then you better not lease there. It's simple.
That's exactly right. That's right. And, we talk about owner-operators being successful, which is important to both of us. And now we've got this law that's trying to get passed to misclassify workers. I've done a little bit of research, but not enough to know a whole lot about this, guys. I really haven't. I've just learning about the ABC test and those 3 questions that you're asked and whether you can answer yes to them or not. But I just wanted to hear from you guys, and maybe Mike start this out to simplify it for me and for our listeners on what we're looking at on this AB5 law or this PRO Act. What's it going to do to the owner-operator?
We try to simplify it, but we can't. It's a very complex issue. It's so broad. Trying to address misclassification issues or worker classification issues across basically every industry. And, trucking doesn't fall into that box. There's no one-size-fits-all for trucking. And that's really the approach that the PRO Act and AB5 and other efforts at the state legislative level have tried to do. I think back, this issue for me probably started 5 or 6 years ago when some states were looking at changing their, they were looking at how to classify workers properly. And every state was coming up, I say every state, the states that we were involved with, they were all coming up with different ways of getting at this, and it was impossible to keep up with. And, California has a very lengthy history on this issue. We've been involved in quite a bit of it, but what we kind of tell people is there are people misclassified in trucking without question. There are, people that they're classified as independent, but they're not. So those issues need to be addressed. But the PRO Act and AB5, they just go so far in the wrong direction that we don't we don't know what the full impact is. And we've asked those questions to the state. We don't get any answers. And I think that's really a common theme among a lot of people is what is the full scope of this bill? And very few people can actually give you an answer on it.
Wow, that's I guess that's really not what you want to hear, but that's the truth. If you can't figure out what's going on, I was looking at some of this information just to figure out, because I guess it started in California. They passed this law and maybe targeting Uber drivers or Lyft drivers or something to that effect, Mike, and then is it passed out in California? I'm assuming it has, right?
Yeah. So even going back before AB5, we were reaching out to the city of LA. They were actually at the time, this goes back to 2017 roughly, and they were looking at passing something to essentially outlaw owner-operators from the Port of L.A. And we said, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. We don't even know, I don't think that's legal, and that's not the approach you want to take anyways. They didn't do that. The next year, the California legislature actually passed a bill called, it was Senate Bill 1402, I think, and that was targeting misclassification in the ports, largely lease purchase agreements, especially those where the carrier owns the truck or has some sort of connection with it. So they did that, and we actually thought it was a pretty good thing. We supported it. I think some other trucking interests in California supported it as well. I won't hold them to that, but and then all of a sudden it was the next year AB 5 comes out, and we're like, wait a second, what is this? And obviously targeted towards the Ubers and Lyfts and kind of the gig economy, but it lumped in every industry in California that didn't have an exemption from it. And there are a few exemptions, but trucking's not one of them. And so it's been in the courts ever since, and we don't know how that's going to play out. But California's not the only state to do this. California is the one that everybody talks about the most, but there are other states that are trying to do what California has already done.
So
California couldn't even tell us how it was going to work. I mean, we took a lot of heat from our membership because we didn't come out for this or against this in California for a while. I mean, people thought we were slow to the dance, and it wasn't that we weren't on top of it or didn't know that it was going on. We were trying to get some real answers from California on how this was going to work, how it was going to affect people, how they were going to enforce it, because like Mike said, there are people out there that we feel are misclassified, probably in lease purchases. There's drivers who get paid on 1099s. There's stuff like that out there that isn't good. So we were trying to figure out, separate the straw from the chaff here to figure out what they were really going after. Nobody gave us an answer, so finally we just chucked the towel and, we're against it. If you can't even tell us how you're going to enforce this, how it's going to work, why would we support it?
Yeah.
Well, some of those are basic questions like, does this apply to an owner-operator with his or her own authority? And you would think that that if you have your own authority, you would be exempt from this, but it's not clear in the text. And I'm not even sure that that's the intent of the legislature in California. Other questions we have is, if you're leased to a carrier that, has a terminal in California, but you don't live in California, does it apply to you then? Or if you live in, say, Nevada, and you go into California once a month, or that's your commute to work every day, does it apply to you then? Kind of basic questions that nobody in California has ever been able to answer.
So if this, and I've got a couple of stupid questions here, Mike, but if this passes in, it's passed in the House, right, and then it's going to the Senate, does that mean it's law everywhere, or do the states then have to pass it? Does that make sense?
The PRO Act in D.C. is different from AB 5 in California. It still has the ABC test, but it's not. It's more nuanced than that. It looks like AB 5, it smells like AB 5, and it's pretty close, but it's not AB 5 in California. Now the concern is that it will have that effect if the courts or the federal government, the Department of Labor, starts interpreting or using the ABC test to determine classification at the federal level. It's kind of the camel's nose, scenario that we're very concerned about. So. It's kind of hard to explain the differences, and quite frankly, we don't know all of it. I mean, it's a very, very broad thing. It impacts trucking. It'll impact different segments of trucking differently. I don't know how it will coexist with state laws. I mean, theoretically, if the PRO Act became law, states would have to incorporate that into their state laws or find a way to comply with it. And we suspect most probably would. So, the PRO Act, no idea where that ends up in Congress, but and that's a concern of ours. But looking at the state level too, I mean, states are getting after this as well. So it's not just a DC fight or a state fight. It's pretty much everywhere.
Huh. So, I mean, if you're in independent contractor and you have I guess you already said that. If you have your own authority, you really don't know how it's going to affect these people. I mean, and you would think transportation, as big as we are in this country, we would be at the forefront of knowing how this is going to affect trucking, and truck drivers. You would think that they would have a say-so in what this is about, but I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't seem like that. Is it sometimes, you talked to Louis, you talked about the lease purchase thing, and I don't guess we can put our finger on that. I think we all know that a lot of times that's a misclassification, whether it's getting around the rules, whether it's a loophole, whether they can, classify a guy as an independent contractor and 1099 him when he's, lease purchase truck. I don't know we don't do that. I don't know all the details in that, but you would think maybe that's something they're targeting, is a situation like that to prevent that, which I kind of understand that. But if you're an independent contractor and you're leased to a company, and you solely run for that company like they do here at Oakley, I mean, a guy can't answer the A, B, and C yes on all those because he solely hauls for Oakley Trucking.
Yeah, and that's part of the deal here that we're not sure about. And part of this I think started over in the ports of California too on lease purchase out there. And my feeling with lease purchases, and it's not against anybody, is in one. I mean, it works for some people, I reckon. But at the end of the day, if you're unhappy at that carrier and you leave the truck and you leave your money and everything else there. Unfortunately, most people go broke, but we're not a fan of it at OOIDA pretty much at all. There's a couple good ones, decent ones, I guess you should say, we've seen, but the majority of it, just like you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, I look at it like this. Personally, I was always leased to a carrier. For where I did, I didn't want to deal with the back office stuff per se. I didn't want to chase my money. I always was leased to good carriers. I found good places to work, good niches, and did really well. So, if you find a good carrier to lease to, I think you can do as well as you can. With a lot of people are better than a lot of people with their authority because, you're not home for brokers and like that. But with long and short, if I'm leased to you at Oakley Trucking and you make me mad, I can take my truck and trailer tomorrow and go somewhere else and go to work.
That's right.
It's that simple. That's right. Where you don't have that option to lease purchase. And that's the sticky wicket. Do we go back to the two-check system of the old days where now I'm a company driver for you at Oakley and you pay me one check for me and then you pay me another check for my truck? I'm not a fan of that. I mean, I hear guys who like that and had it. I'm not a fan of that because at the end of the day, there's only so much of a pie you can get. So, you're either going to pay me 75% and I take care of everything, or you're going to pay me 50% for my truck and 25% as a driver. Well, I'm still only getting 75%.
Yeah.
The way I kind of see it. I would rather buy my own health insurance, invest my own retirement, pay my own taxes. I don't want you doing that stuff for me. I want you to give me freight, and I want you to pay me at the end of the week. That's all I want from you as a carrier, per se. And I'll go haul your freight and be where I need to be. That's the way it should work. So, my concern is, which we talked about, even if you have your own authority, if you're brokering from a motor carrier, like say a Landstar or a JBLN or something like that, even with your own authority, you're brokering from somebody who's in trucking, who has trucks, who has trailers. Where do you fall in that B? That's kind of a fuzzy line there.
Yeah.
If you're an owner-operator with your motor carrier authority and you haul for your own customers, you're probably we think you're 100% fine. It's when you get into brokering and different stuff like that, it all gets fuzzy.
Lawmakers around the country, whether it's the California or Congress, most of them know very little about trucking. I mean, that's just the reality. There are some that have a trucking background, that have a CDL, that know trucking, but most don't. And I'm not knocking them for that. That's just the way things are. You can't know every single issue just because you're a member of Congress, right? You have staff. But the point I'm making is trying to explain the differences between a lease purchase agreement and a traditional lease agreement. The reaction you get from lawmakers that really don't know much about trucking, it's priceless at times. I mean, They don't know the differences between the two, and we to expect them to would be probably asking too much. I mean, that's the challenge that we have. Is we made that point with the city of LA, with the California legislature. We said, wait a second. People are misclassified. Here is how it's usually done, but don't mix that up with traditional lease agreements that, for the most part, now there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part are work for people. People like it. So that's been a struggle for us is really making it a distinction between the two.
That is priceless right there. That is exactly what I needed to hear, because I see a lot of truth with that with the people I deal with, just around the trucking business, because people don't understand it. Even though there are millions of truck drivers and they're all over the place, people don't understand what goes on in the transportation world, and that it employs so many people in the country. You would think it would get more attention, but that's really neat that you say that you have to explain to the people making the decisions what the difference is, in classifications, whether it's lease purchase or lease to a company or have on authority. I mean, I can see that, because it was Greek to me before I got in trucking. I didn't have a clue till you get into it and you understand the different options that guys have.
Well, and trucking's such a big, diverse world. It seems like no matter what you talk about in trucking, there's always a but, or there's always an exception, because everybody does something different. Everybody's, what you haul, depending on what kind of trailer you got, depending on what region you live in. It's just so vast, and, it's just not a cookie-cutter industry.
Yeah. And that's, to Louie's point about us hearing from members, I mean, that's over the decades, that has been the biggest complaint that we've had is lease purchase agreements. Now, I'm not saying that every lease purchase agreement is bad. It works for some people, and some people like it. But if you're thinking about, Louie used the pie example, right? And every industry is going to have some kind of issues. And look, there are people in trucking that are misclassified. We know that. But it's not everybody. It's not every leased owner operator. And that's the major flaw with something like AB5 is you are basically deemed an employee until you prove otherwise. And that's just a very wrong approach. I don't see how the state actually can do that. You're guilty until proven innocent. And that's sort of, again, the PRO Act in D.C. is a little different, but it's sort of, that's the intent, is basically, make people employees, let them prove that they're independent. And with the ABC test in California, it's hard for us to imagine a scenario or a relationship or a business agreement where a leased owner operator would be considered independent. We can't see how that would happen.
Right. So, okay, Mike, put you on the spot here. So is this PRO Act, what's the chances of this thing passing?
So it passed the House last year. We knew that. We knew it would die in the Senate. They don't have 60 votes. That dynamic is a little different this year with the change in the November, with the outcome of the November elections. Democrats control everything in D.C., but they still don't have 60 votes to get the PRO Act through the Senate. So in my opinion, and trust me, I've been wrong before and I will be wrong again. When I try to predict what Congress does, I'm usually wrong, actually. So the only way I can see the PRO Act becoming law is if they basically use some sort of legislative process that waives filibuster, whether that's reconciliation or just an outright rule change, getting rid of the filibuster and allow things to pass with a simple majority in the Senate. That's how the PRO Act would become law. Right now, I don't think it has a chance, but that could change tomorrow. If the Senate is going to require 60 votes to pass the PRO Act, I don't think it becomes law. The only chance it has is if they, skirt that requirement, do away with the filibuster, use reconciliation, and nobody can even really tell you what reconciliation is or does. But there are other ways, though. Reconciliation is what people hear about now, but there are other ways that Congress, the Senate, can get rid of the filibuster. And if they do, that's when the PRO Act has a serious chance at becoming law.
And if it does become law, chances are slim, but if it does, what happens next? I mean, what is the next step for an independent contractor out here working every day?
Well, so that's the nuance between the PRO Act. So what happens next? Lawsuits will probably be filed, but the PRO Act basically uses the ABC test to determine your classification for organizing purposes only. So theoretically, it would reclassify independent contractors as employees and let them, it would make it easier for them to organize. So that's the difference between the PRO Act and AB5 is the PRO Act is largely for unionization type stuff. So theoretically, you could be considered an independent contractor, I suppose, by some law or some state law. And then the PRO Act would say, well, for organization, for unionization purposes, you're an employee. So you could be both, I suppose, with the PRO Act. But I really don't know. I mean, if you try to get someone in Congress to explain to you what impact the PRO Act will have on trucking, good luck. I doubt you'll find it.
Clear as mud, isn't it? Oh, man.
But that's the reality. I mean, when our folks in D.C. are meeting with, like in this case, the House Education and Labor Committee, who has jurisdiction over the PRO Act, I mean, most of our issues live in the Transportation Committee on the House side. On the Senate side, it's Senate Commerce, Senate EPW. Those are where trucking issues usually live. The PRO Act is different. It's a labor issue. It lives in the House Education and Labor Committee, or whatever they call it now. So that's an entirely different world for us. But I still don't think that, if we reached out to every single member, Republican and Democrat, on the House Education and Labor Committee, I suspect nobody would be able to tell us what impact this would have on trucking, because I don't think anybody knows.
Well,
nor any other business for that matter. If we really want to be honest.
Can't tell us about anything.
Let me make one more point. Back in 2019, the New Jersey legislature was trying to do their own ABC test mirrored after California's AB5 law. And there was a lot of people that were opposed to that. We opposed it. We filed testimony. The point I'm making, though, is when I watched that hearing back in 2019, I think it was the end of the year, towards the end of the year, there were people that were coming from all over the state to testify, not in trucking. I mean, there were truckers there too, but freelance writers and journalists and all kinds of people that were there saying, hey, I'm an independent contractor. This is why I'm independent. I used to be an employee. I wanted to be independent for, A, B, and C reasons, whatever reasons you have. But and what the message that they had to the legislature at the time was, we don't know what this bill is going to do to us. We don't, the concern is that it basically forces everybody to be an employee. And that's very problematic, not just for trucking, but for everybody who, my wife is self-employed. So nobody knows. And that's just not the way that government should run things.
Totally agree. Well, I'm about to run out of time here, guys, but I really appreciate y'all explaining this to me and simplifying it, as much as you can. I know there's a lot of unknown in it right now, and that I'm realizing just by having a conversation with you guys, and I appreciate y'all doing that, because our owner-operators, are asking us, how this is going to affect. So, it looks like, I know it could change daily tomorrow, but right now it looks like it's hopefully going to be put off for a while and doesn't affect them directly, and hopefully doesn't affect what we do, our business model. Of course, we always worried about that here at Oakley Trucking. Is your business model going to work with owner-operators leased to you and running under your authority? So hopefully we'll get past that, and it won't affect anybody in a negative way. We need things to affect people in a positive way, to where owner-operators are successful and making money, and more people want to get into it, and that kind of deal. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe things will help down the road. But
and let me just add too. I always kind of use the 10% is the figure I use, right? Every industry, like 10% is bad actors or 10% is whatever, right? So in any industry, there's, 10% is kind of like, give or take. That's where the issue is. And look, we know people are misclassified in trucking, and what we've told lawmakers in California, in DC, is go after the problem, target it, use a scalpel, right? Not a sledgehammer, like. Right. And there are ways you could do that. There really are ways you can do that. So I don't know if it's just not if congressional intent wants to be much broader than that, right? If being so broad to capture everything is your intent, then the PRO Act is what you want. AB 5 is what you want. But if you want to basically go after those that are misclassified, whether it's in trucking or anything else, there are better, more targeted ways that you can do that. And we've been screaming for a long time about this stuff, about going too far, right? So the status quo doesn't work for a lot of people because there are issues in trucking. But on the other hand, AB 5 in the PRO Act it goes too far in the other direction. There's a middle ground here. We need to find it.
We are talking to Mike Matousek, Manager of Government Affairs, and Lewie Pugh, Executive VP at OOIDA, on this episode of the Oakley Podcast. And this episode is brought to us by Aero Truck Sales out of Springfield, Missouri, which is not far from you guys. We deal a lot with Aero Truck Sales. Our buddy Trey Visor and Keith Wilson out of Kansas City and Springfield, Missouri, do a lot of business with them. Those guys are really fantastic. If you're interested in a truck, be sure and give those guys a call, 573-216-6047. Hey, before we end this episode, also, you got to break it up a little bit. Tell us, you guys, Mike, start with you. What do you like to do on the weekends, man?
I have a 6-year-old and a 6-month-old.
Oh, my.
Both little boys. So my weekends are t-ball and soccer and stuff like that. I actually like to cook. And back in the day, before I moved out to Missouri, I used to like to go to the beach and surf and do all that stuff. So I play a lot of golf and a lot of disc golf. So golf and disc golf are kind of my two hobbies. And then doing the kid thing with the 6-year-old and 6-month-old is really my life, and my wife, of course. So.
That takes up a lot of your time. I know that disc golf is becoming popular. I've actually seen some people doing that. And that's for people who don't know, that's with the Frisbees, right?
It's kind of like if you can't play baseball anymore, you play beer league softball, right? So it's for people that like me, that recreationally I'm not really good at. So I can go out and play and throw disc. It's pretty cheap. It's like $15 a disc. The baskets are out there. It's usually free to play, so that's right up my alley.
So Lewie, how's your disc golf game going?
The only kind of golf I play, there's got to be a windmill involved. Other than that, I don't play no disc golf. I don't play no pasture pool. I don't play that stuff.
That's great, man. What keeps you occupied on the weekend?
With cows and pigs, and he builds fence on the weekend.
My weekend, I grew up on a farm in Eastern Ohio, so I like that kind of stuff. And my weekends, I've got a small farm here in Missouri. I got some feeder calves, and I got some couple goats that belong to my girlfriend. And we've also I get feeder pigs in the summer and feed. But I mean, that's labor of love, I guess. But then I like to, for relaxation, I guess you would say, I like messing with either my old tractor, kind of gearhead, I guess, or motorhead. I like to mess with old tractors, stuff like that. Motorcycles, and that's how we travel. I travel. I've been all over the United States on my motorcycle, and in fact, I have a sidecar on my motorcycle now for my dog to ride with me. I got a border collie dog. He's been to California. He used to ride with me in a semi, and that's how we ended up with a sidecar. He used to go everywhere with me in a semi. When I moved out here, I got this, desk driving job. And he didn't get to go to work with me no more, and he was all sad all the time. So then I felt sad to leave him on the weekends to go ride my bike. So I bought a sidecar so he could go along. So, but I like to ride bikes. I like to fish. I like to hunt. Since I moved out here, I haven't hunted much. I had ground back in Ohio and hunted on stuff back there. But I like to fish and hunt and stuff like that.
Yeah, anything outdoors, that's I'm with you on that. And anytime I can get outside, especially this time of year when it's getting beautiful, man, it's hard for me to sit in here.
And Louie's a good teacher too. Someone like me, he actually taught me how to. Well, I wouldn't say he taught me how to build fence, but he taught me how to help him build fence. So my role was very small and something that probably Bandit could have done. But I learned a little bit nonetheless and had fun doing it. So.
That's great.
And Mike's a good farm worker.
That's great.
Anything, though.
My boys, I always try to. I've got a 23-year-old and fixing to be 23 and 21. So I'm always, when they come to the house, when y'all come to the house, man, Mom's cooking supper. You know, they're gone doing their own thing, so we only see them every week or two. I'm like, when y'all coming over, Mom's cooking supper, got some good food over here. And as soon as they get in there, I'm like, hey, can you help me get this mulch out of the back of the truck? Can you grab that weed eater? Can you? They're like, Dad, no, I'm out, Dad. I know you're trying to trick me into doing some work. I'm like, man, they used to be free labor.
They wanted to eat, not work.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all joining me today and helping owner-operators be successful, and just the goal that OOIDA has overall in helping truck drivers and owner-operators just, be successful and doing the right things. You guys do a heck of a job, and I'm glad to be associated with you. And we have owner-operators that I'm sure are members of OOIDA, and if not, if they're not a member of OOIDA, what do they need to do?
Just pick up a telephone or get online at OOIDA, or you can get on the telephone and call 816-229-0712. I got to read the number. That's how bad we are, because we all lost phones, It's all saved on my phone. I don't know any phone number. But either way, pick up the phone, call us, or get on OOIDA.com. You can join online. I just want to wish everybody a happy Easter, a blessed Easter. And, everybody be safe out there on the road. Thanks to all the truckers for what they do. I can't do what I do. Mike can't do what he can. You can't do what you can't do if it wasn't for truckers. This country lives and dies by trucks. And, thank you to the American men and women who drive a truck. We appreciate it very much.
And thanks to Oakley Trucking for having us on. Appreciate it.
Yes.
You bet, guys. Good luck. I appreciate good luck on your podcast, too. Well, it's not your live. What's that, Exit 24 Live? Good luck on that, too, man. That's going great. Everybody tune in on that. When is that, Mike? When does that come out?
Every other Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central. So the next show is
The 7th.
April 7th.
Okay, good deal. Okay, that's all the time we have for this episode of the Oakley Podcast. I want to thank my guests, Mike Matousek and Lewie Pugh from OOIDA. Appreciate you guys joining me this week on the Oakley Podcast. Be sure and share the Oakley Podcast with all your friends out there. Appreciate the support, you guys listening every week and giving me feedback on it. I really do. Makes a difference in what we do here at Oakley. If you got any questions about Oakley Trucking and you're interested in leasing on with us, man, give us a call up here at the office. 800-662-0875 is the phone number. And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode of the Oakley Podcast. We'll talk to you next week.